Thank you for joining me on this little walk through history.
The Legacy of Anne Brewer Paschal. From a childhood in the Georgia frontier, she grew into a beloved, self-educated country doctor. She was born in 1776 in Yadkin County, North Carolina, at the start of the Revolutionary War. The extended Brewer clan moved lock, stock, and barrel down the Georgia Road section of the Great Wagon Road from Virginia at the end of the Revolutionary War in 1784. At the age of 8, her homestead training continued on the rich virgin property of Troublesome Creek, just south of Lexington, Georgia. Agnes, like many of the early settlers of Georgia and the Carolinas, was of a breed of self-motivated, self-reliant folks looking for a better life with productive land. On the wild but well-watered forest of today's Oglethorpe County, her family found a fruitful wilderness teeming with fish, turkeys, bear, deer. And in the wild forest, their cattle and hogs grew fat upon green cane, acorns, chestnuts, hickory nuts, and wild grapes. Her family community began with cutting down logs, clearing brush for cabins, and because of the wild conflict with the Cherokees and the Creek Indians, built their own family fort called Fort Brewer as a protective retreat from marauding Indians. At an early age, she was an avid reader, homeschooled in a family library, and trained in domestic skills so critical for independent rural frontier settlement. At an early age, she saw problems around her frontier home, and later as an adult in Lexington, Georgia, Skull Shoals, and North Georgia, she searched until she found solutions, practical solutions to life's obstacles. In later years, she met the challenge of rampant rounds of deadly diseases like yellow fever, pneumonia, malaria, and other medical problems. She described living in the mill town of Skull Shoals as a sickly place. She was a busy innkeeper with 3 sons, and she supported the paper mill development and took it upon herself to bring doctors, certified traditional doctors, into her family presence so she could learn the medical arts by inquiry and discussion. One visiting formal physician, Dr. Merritt of Lexington, generously relayed established traditional treatment techniques and basic training, including compounding formulas with herbs and imported chemicals. He was a great talker and an avid reader and enjoyed interacting on a frequent basis with his attentive Paschal audience. The doctor would spend whole evenings in the sitting room of the 2-story Skull Shoals Inn with his hostess Agnes, her husband G.W., and her children. And the doctor would expound on a variety of topics from history to politics to religion. Agnes loved the written word and at times would read on disease theories written by classic and contemporary authors. For Mrs. Paschal, each lesson was quickly incorporated into her healing practice until constantly improving her skills until she was confident to practice on her own. Agnes valued any positive experience that taught her to be effective in society by being self-reliant. A woman like her, of such faith, strength of will, and mind, could never be idle anywhere she ventured in the early 1800s of Georgia. As a good wife, she labored long hours to house visitors at the inn and aid her husband and relieve him of burdens whenever and wherever she could. She was a devoted mother that carefully raised her children. It was her nature to keep order in every part of her life. As a consummate innkeeper, mother, and folk doctor, always at the ready to help neighbors in need that counted on her for a visit to heal or help when unmanageable sickness or injury occurred. It was difficult for her to say no. Throughout life, Agnes took it upon herself to spiritually prepare for her heavenly future when she felt a final accounting of her actions must be given. In the first half of the 19th century, getting treatment for any kind of ailment was essentially the roll of the dice. Many folks in the rural South turned to folk herbal medicine and a supportive religious philosophy. At Skull Shoals, Agnes and her neighbor, Dr. Lindsay Durham, served many needy folks with the herb elixirs and tinctures. By our standards, old-time traditional medical treatment was primitive and even barbaric, with little understanding of human metabolism and the origin of disease. In the early 1800s of Georgia, formal medical training was commonly in the Penn Medical School in Philadelphia. The prevailing regular medical science in the early 1800s hadn't changed much through the centuries since Greek and Roman times. It was based on the four humors philosophy, and this is not a joke. The four humors, or fluids within the body, were considered the cause of all ailments and dis-ease. The humors were known as black bile, yellow bile, which is essentially urine, blood, or phlegm. The most respected doctors of the time treated President George Washington for a sore throat. They employed the common treatment, which was bloodletting, to deal with what they considered the blood humor problem. After 40% of his blood was drained, he died December 14, 1799. Agnes and Skull Shoals herbalist Lindsay Durham followed an alternative, more natural medical philosophy, and the general medical establishment called them non-certified irregulars. Many rural folks, often with little finances, didn't trust the bloodletting and other standard treatment practices and turned to the herbalists and folk healers as an alternative, natural, faith-based treatment. Agnes was never registered as a physician because women were not allowed into the Penn Medical School. If you were a woman that needed medical treatment, it was awkward, uncomfortable, and perhaps bizarre. Under cultural norms of the time, a male doctor was not allowed to see very much exposed skin from a female patient beyond looking at hands, feet, and head areas. They had to reach under a woman's long garment to do any kind of examination while avoiding a view of bare torso skin. So you can imagine the awkward male doctor approach to female problems or assisting in childbirth. Agnes was a compassionate, gentle, effective alternative, an approach very much needed and loved. She was in demand till very late in life. In 1804, danger lurked in the Atlantic Ocean as powerful navies of France and England wrestled for control of trade routes. American President Thomas Jefferson faced growing British aggression, leading to the War of 1812. England stifled open trade of paper, tobacco, leather, rice, and other American goods. The Athens, Georgia newspaper, the foreign correspondent in Georgia Express, was in dire need of paper for their press. Zachary Sims, the mechanical entrepreneur of Skull Shoals, had the solution. He had a plan for building the first water-powered paper mill in Georgia on the Oconee River. And in 1809, Sim had already operated a sawmill, a grist mill, and built the only toll bridge along the river for many miles. He asked the state of Georgia for a loan of $4,000 in a term of 4 years. They considered his business experience, but only offered him $3,000 in 3 years to pay it back. Blacksmith Sims linked up with the Virginian Thomas Ligon, and then he called his distant relative George W. Paschal and his wife Agnes, who had mill and innkeeping experience, and he invited them to come to Skull Shoals to support the paper production. The Paschals gave their personal savings of $1,000 as a contribution to Sims for the project, and it was considered by their friends a foolish venture. Agnes spent much of her time multitasking at the inn, serving visitors, workers, and as the mother of a growing family of young boys. Her son Augustus arrived October 1st, 1803, Isaiah 1807, son Franklin in 1810, and perhaps the most interesting was the long-named Lorenzo Columbus George Washington Paschal. They call him G.W. Jr. He was born November 23rd, 1812. Later, as a lawyer, he accompanied Cherokee Chief Ridge and the Ridge family on the Trail of Tears. She had two more children after Skull Souls. It was Carissa, born 1814, and Teresa, born 1816. After some initial paper production, Sims struggled with the paper project and had to sell part of the mill complex to Thomas Ligon. There was a drought that had lowered the river power to the mill. The War of 1812 was over, so paper imports began again, and to add more problems, the state loan was due. With the demise of the paper mill, G.W. Jr. moved Agnes and family to a place called Bowling Green, now a ghost town, 12 miles northeast of Skull Souls and just north of the little town of Maxey's. The Paschals were hired to manage the inn, which was catering to prosperous planters wanting food, lodging, liquor, and the ability to bet on their jockeys and racehorses. After some time there, G.W. Jr. helped move his family and his mother to Dahlonega area to a small inn in Auraria, Georgia. In 1829, the Georgia gold rush was underway with thousands of miners flooding the nearby Piedmont Hills, recently obtained from Cherokee tribal land. It was a wild, dangerous, and exciting time for young men seeking a fortune. Their alcohol bouts often fueled fighting and crime. Some of them, when they were desperate, ill, or homesick, would turn to Agnes as a Christian oasis. She was a warm-hearted listener with compassionate counsel, a warm meal, or medical treatment at her inn, a safe location. Her son, G.W. Jr., moved on beyond his mother's inn and aided Cherokee Chief Ridge family, including daughter Sarah Ridge, and accompanied them on the Trail of Tears. He was under the employment of General Wool of the Union Army. In Oklahoma, he supported the Ridge family, relatives. In Arkansas as well. And in Texas, he became a close friend to an advisor to Sam Houston. Eventually, G.W. went to Washington, D.C. to become a professor at Georgetown University, where in later years he wrote a reminiscence about his amazing mother's life, a book called 94 Years. At the advanced age of 71, while she was living in Auraria, she would venture out alone in a carriage on dark mountain trails to help someone in need. One memorable example of her courageous medical work was when 3 regular doctors attended to a female patient but gave up any hope of saving the woman. One physician left surgical equipment for Agnes, and with a minor operation, she saved the woman's life and eased the intense worry of the distraught family. She was an amazing, determined, talented woman, loved by many, and she was called the Angel of Auraria. Agnes passed on in 1869, approaching the amazing age of 94, leaving a Georgia service legacy unmatched in the first half of the 19th century. Agnes was buried in the Antioch Baptist Cemetery in Aurora, part of Lumpkin County, Georgia. She is now forgotten Georgia history.
Agnes was an incredible woman. I feel I know her after studying all of the amazing service she did to the community. self-taught doctor, compassionate innkeeper family, matriarch, lived through 16 presidents, born at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, ended shortly after the Civil War. She's not related to me. I'm not a relative of hers, but I feel almost family, and maybe she would consider us family for considering all of her life's work. But she is just one story in forgotten Georgia history. And I want to thank you for staying with me and journeying back in time to see these incredible people and interesting stories.